Welcome to Lotus Pavilion. We hope you have a wonderful time today. On the day the Crown Prince ascended the throne, I personally witnessed him entangled passionately in bed with Lin Xiaoxiao, the daughter of the convicted traitor. He hurriedly shielded her behind him, his voice laced with a hint of guilt. Jiao and I have known each other since we were children. I couldn't bear to watch her reduced to an official prostitute. You will become the empress in the future. You must learn to be tolerant and magnanimous. I didn't utter a single word. I simply turned around in silence and left. Afterward, my father poured all his efforts into helping Pei Heng securely claim the dragon throne. Who could have known that once the situation was settled, Pei Heng would turn around and accuse my father of treason? That day, blood flowed like rivers through the Prime Minister's estate. Meanwhile, in the inner palace, I was beaten to death with staves. Lin Xiaoxiao stomped hard on my face, laughing coldly. Lin Xiaoxiao, your father reported my father for treason, didn't he? This is your family's retribution. 2 months later, my childhood sweetheart Mu Jin'an raised troops in rebellion and bathed the imperial palace in blood. The 5th prince stepped over the fresh blood of Pei Heng and Lin Xiaoxiao to ascend the throne. And Mu Jin'an, he drew his sword and committed suicide before my grave. His voice had been so gentle. Xiaoxiao, don't be afraid. I've come for you. When I opened my eyes once more, I had returned to my 18th birthday. The emperor looked at me with a beaming smile. Shower, what kind of husband do you want? I sat there in a daze for a long time before finally realizing I had been reborn. Today was my birthday banquet. The Prime Minister's estate was bustling with guests, officials coming and going without end. Even His Majesty himself had come to attend in person. Shower, tell us what kind of husband you desire, and we shall grant the marriage. The emperor spoke with a warm smile. In that instant, every gaze in the grand hall turned toward me. In my previous life, I had listened to my father and obediently lowered my head, replying that I would leave everything to His Majesty's decision. As a result, I was betrothed to Crown Prince Pei Heng and became the future crown princess. But this time, I refused to lower my head. I respectfully knelt before the emperor, my voice steady and calm. This humble daughter has long secretly admired the general. I beg your majesty to grant us this union. The cold and aloof man sitting in the distance suddenly lifted his head. The entire hall erupted into commotion. Everyone knew my father belonged to the crown prince's faction, while Mu Jin'an was aligned with the 5th prince. My words were like throwing a massive stone into a still lake. The emperor glanced at my father with deep meaning in his eyes. My father immediately flew into a rage. Have you drunk yourself senseless? How dare you speak such nonsense in front of His Majesty? I remained kneeling upright, refusing to rise. The emperor's gaze darkened as it shifted toward Mu Jin'an. I wonder if Xiao's affection is one-sided or if the feelings are mutual. All eyes turned to Mu Jin'an, waiting to see how he would respond. If he agreed, it would mean he would instantly be thrust into the eye of the storm. The border general marrying the prime minister's daughter. Neither the emperor nor the crown prince would be able to rest easy. I didn't dare turn around to look at Mu Jin'an's expression. I could only pray that this time he would be brave enough. A cold wind swept through the grand hall. The tall man strode forward quickly, kneeling beside me and firmly grasping my hand. This matter was my fault for not speaking up first. I truly cannot suppress my feelings for Xiao any longer. I beg your majesty to grant us this marriage. Under the watchful eyes of all the ministers, the emperor was backed into a corner with no way to refuse. In the end, he had no choice but to bestow the marriage. From that moment on, I became Mu Jin'an's fiancée. The crown prince remained silent from beginning to end. He stared at me deeply for a long moment before standing up and leaving his seat. Waves of discussion immediately rose around us. People's eyes met, filled with curiosity and suspicion. I raised my head to look at my father. His face had turned deathly pale, his mustache trembling with fury, as if he were about to faint on the spot. Not far away, the 5th prince was also shaking, perhaps from sheer shock. After the banquet ended, my father immediately dragged me into a room and locked the door. You've gone too far. Do you have any idea what kind of disaster you've caused? Your father is the prime minister. Your marriage involves countless interests and benefits. Don't you understand? You think you can marry whoever you want. His face flushed red with anger. Let me tell you clearly. The marriage between you and Mu Jin'an cannot happen. You can only marry Pei Heng. I looked calmly at my father. Father, Pei Heng is ruthless and heartless. He will not spare us in the future. My father laughed out of sheer fury. You even know how to read people now. What kind of bewitching potion did Mu Jin'an feed you so that you're so determined to marry him? Knowing I couldn't reason with my father, I pulled out a handkerchief and began to cry. My father feared my tears the most. He paced around the room twice before finally flicking his sleeve and storming out. The room fell silent once more. I stood quietly for a moment before walking over to close the door. Suddenly, a strong hand held the door frame firmly in place. Mu Jin'an pushed the door open and stepped inside. I looked at the man before me, who felt both familiar and strangely distant. An indescribable emotion surged in my chest. I desperately wanted to hug him. In my previous life after I married Pei Heng, we never spoke again. I rose from Crown Princess to Empress, while he went from Deputy General to the Great Border General. Our paths never crossed again. If he hadn't devoted everything to avenging me, if he hadn't abandoned everything to follow me in death, I might never have known how deeply he loved me. Mu Jin, it's been a long time. I spoke softly, my eyes turning red. Mu Jin'an looked at me coldly instead. Lin Xiaoxiao, who got you drunk? Let me advise you. Don't get involved in these power struggles. I froze and looked up at him. Mu Jin'an, are you afraid? He snorted coldly and didn't answer. I knew he wasn't afraid. If he truly were, he wouldn't have cooperated with me in front of the emperor. He simply didn't believe that I genuinely wanted to marry him. Mu Jin, no matter how many interests are involved, no matter what others are plotting. I stared straight into his eyes. I only have one question for you. If I want to marry you, will you take me as your wife or not? Mu Jin'an stared at me for a very long time before suddenly turning and walking away. I watched his tall figure gradually disappear into the night, the corners of my lips curving up slightly. Mu Jin'an, I don't know where this life will lead us. But no matter what, I want to stand by your side. I knew Pei Heng would never let this marriage decree go easily. He needed the support of the Prime Minister's estate to ascend the throne. So when the Empress sent someone to summon me into the palace, I immediately understood that Pei Heng wanted to see me. Xior, I've missed you so much. Inside the Empress's palace, Pei Heng gazed at me with deep affection. In my previous life, I had been fooled by this very act, believing he truly loved me. But in reality, this man would say and do anything to achieve his goals. Your Highness, please watch your words. I am now Mu Jin'an's fiancé, I said, looking at him coldly. Pei Heng's eyes immediately reddened. Xior, it was my fault. I should have spoken clearly with Father Emperor. I should have asked him to bestow our marriage. Xior, we've known each other for so long, you know my heart. In my heart, there is only you. I only want you. I watched him perform silently, too lazy to say even a single extra word. Seeing that I remained unmoved, Pei Heng immediately changed his tone. Xior, marriage is no child's play. We are members of the imperial family and nobility, we must consider the greater picture. Last night, fifth brother knelt outside Father Emperor's hall the entire night but was not granted an audience. He stared at me intently. Mu Jin'an holds military power, and is now connected to the Prime Minister's estate through marriage. Have you considered what position this puts your father in? Xior, I am the one who is truly suited for you. As long as you speak up, I am willing to do everything in my power to beg Father Emperor to change the imperial decree. When he finished, I simply let out a soft yawn. Are you done? Pei Heng was stunned. A flash of viciousness suddenly appeared in those eyes that had been full of deep affection. I pretended not to notice and turned to leave. After leaving the imperial palace, I secretly made my way to the fifth prince's estate. The moment the fifth prince saw me, he nearly jumped out of his skin. Why is it you? What are you doing here? Ancestors above, please leave quickly. You're going to get me killed. Everyone now thinks I want to use your father to fight for the position of crown prince. This is terrifying. I reached out and firmly grabbed the restless, jumping Pei Zhan, looking straight into his eyes with a solemn voice. Why don't you want to fight for it? The crown prince can be deposed, and a new one can be established. Isn't that right? Fifth Prince Pei Heng stared at me fixedly. A moment later, a sharp, calculating glint gradually appeared in his once innocent eyes. Lin Xiaoxiao, you truly surprised this prince, he continued. Jin'an once said you always consider the greater good and strictly follow propriety and etiquette. It seems he was wrong about you. I gently smoothed my skirt and offered a perfectly proper smile. He wasn't wrong, it's just that people change. Pei Heng looked at me quietly. What exactly do you want? I spoke each word with force. I want Pei Heng to suffer eternal damnation. Pei Heng raised an eyebrow. He slowly approached me, a chilling light flashing in his eyes. So you schemed every possible way to marry Mu Jin'an and are now inciting me to fight for the throne. Also you can use us as tools to overthrow Pei Heng, correct? I coughed lightly and covered my mouth with my hand. Isn't Mu Jin'an exactly that kind of tool? But he is the man in my heart. Pei Heng let out a strange laugh, as if he had just heard something incredibly amusing. He turned and sat lazily in the chair beside him, looking at me with a languid expression. Lin Xiaoxiao, this prince has no interest in fighting for power. I only seek peace and prosperity. You should go back. I didn't say another word. I simply took out a piece of paper from my sleeve and gently placed it on the table. On it were written only 2 words, Shenjiao. Pei Heng glanced at it and seemed completely unconcerned. He took a sip of tea and casually placed the teacup on top of the paper. See the guest out. I turned and left the Prince of Lin's estate. After I had gone far away, Pei Heng looked toward the screen behind him, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. This little girl is truly bold and refreshing. Can you hold yourself back? The man who stepped out from behind the screen didn't speak, but the corners of his lips couldn't help but curve upwards slightly. Ever since I returned from the palace, I didn't know what the Empress had said to my father, but he suddenly issued a strict order forbidding me from leaving the estate freely. I had originally planned to sneak out to find Mu Jin'an, but now I couldn't even step past the Prime Minister's gates at night. After thinking it over again and again, I decided to take a risk. Young miss, this wall is really high. Can we actually climb over it? Stop talking nonsense and hold the ladder steady. In the back courtyard, I had already climbed nearly to the top of the wall. My maid, Yu Chuan, stood below with a face full of anxiety. Young miss, be careful. Don't fall. Before she could finish speaking, my foot slipped off the edge of the wall. In that moment of panic, before I could even cry out, I fell straight into a pair of strong, solid arms. Mu Jin'an caught me, spun once in the air, and landed steadily on the ground. I took the opportunity to cling tightly to him, refusing to let go no matter what. Wah, I was so scared I almost died. Mu Jin'an stood motionless. Why climb the wall? To find you. I missed you. The man I was hugging seemed to tremble slightly. He quickly pried my hands away and deliberately kept his distance. Just as I reached out to grab his hand again, he took a step back. His distant gaze made a surge of anger rise in my chest. My voice choked up. Mu Jin, do you not like me anymore? Mu Jin'an glanced around, his voice indifferent. 2 years ago, right here in this very spot, you said you would never see me again. You said, we should consider the greater good, and not make things difficult for your father. You said there was only sibling affection between us and told me to find a good girl to marry. I took a deep breath and cut him off. I remember what I said, but I've regretted it. Mu Jin'an's dark, deep eyes stared fixedly at me. I looked back at him with equal seriousness. Mu Jin'an, I've regretted it. Do you want to start over? He didn't answer. His face was as cold as frost, but at the bottom of his eyes, I clearly saw a flicker of emotion. I reached out and touched his face. My fingertips slowly traced across his brows and the corners of his eyes. Mu Jin'an, what existed between us has never been merely sibling affection. Suddenly, a strong force pulled me against the wall. His scorching breath fanned against my ear as he spoke in a low, heavy voice, word by word. Lin Xiaoxiao, I have never left, but from this moment on, I will not give you any chance to regret it again. A heavy, burning kiss descended upon me. I sank deeply into it, completely unable to escape. Young miss, are you all right? Huh. Yu Chuan poked her head over the top of the wall. The moment she saw the scene before her, she immediately pulled her head back. I hurriedly pushed Mu Jin'an away. Someone saw us. Clearly displeased, Mu Jin'an pulled me back into his arms, leaving me speechless. News from the 5th prince arrived quickly. Shenjiao had been found. Pei Heng had hidden her in a music house. During the day, she disguised herself as a female musician, with numerous hidden guards protecting her. Pei Heng was extremely cautious. Only occasionally, in the middle of the night, would he take her onto a boat. The two would secretly meet on the lake. I frowned slightly. I needed to find a way to force him to seek her out even during the day. Pei Zhan drank his tea in silence. I asked, "How do we lure Pei Heng out?" Pei Zhan turned his head away, pretending he hadn't heard. I smiled at him. "Your Highness, do you enjoy listening to music?" Pei Zhan shuddered and pointed straight at me. "I know exactly what you're thinking. Let me tell you, it's impossible. No matter what, this prince will not lower his status for some official's daughter." An incensed sticks time later, the fifth prince dressed up as a noble young master and appeared at the entrance of the music house. The fifth prince had always been known for his romantic nature. Pretending to be a young lord to attract Shen Jiao's attention was as easy as flipping his hand. A few days later, through a mix of coaxing and coercion, he brought Shen Jiao to a private residence. The hidden guards immediately reported the news to Pei Heng. Pei Heng flew into a thunderous rage and rushed over. But inside the room, there was only Shen Jiao. Tears streamed down her face as she looked panicked and helpless. "Heng Ji, you've finally come. That man forced me here. He said if I didn't come, he would kill me. The moment he heard you were here, he ran away. Thank goodness you arrived in time." Jiao Jiao was so scared. Pei Heng immediately pulled her tightly into his arms, his eyes filled with killing intent. A while later, he led Shen Jiao out and came face to face with my father. Behind my father stood the emperor, dressed in ordinary clothes. Everyone was stunned. The emperor would occasionally go out incognito with my father to inspect the people's conditions. This was an extremely secret matter. Besides my father, only I knew about it. I had already found out where they would be today, so I had informed Pei Zhan in advance. At this moment, before Pei Heng could even react, the emperor's face had already darkened. He turned and left without a word. In his eyes, there was clear displeasure. He simply thought Pei Heng was secretly indulging in a private affair. But my father was completely frozen in shock. He had recognized Shen Jiao. She was the daughter of Shen Pingzhang. That afternoon, my father returned to the prime minister's estate with a heavy, troubled expression. I had been waiting in the front hall. "Father, have you finally seen Pei Heng's true face?" My father looked at me in astonishment. "Xiao I spoke earnestly. "Father, Shen Pingzhang was personally imprisoned by you. Shen Jiao hates you the most. Back then, Shen Pingzhang colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country for personal gain, causing countless innocent soldiers and civilians to die unjustly. 3 cities were handed over to the enemy. That is a grave crime." I stared straight at my father. Pei Heng is the crown prince, yet he is drowning in love, unable to distinguish right from wrong, and has no principles. How can such a man shoulder great responsibilities? My father slowly sat down, remaining silent for a long time. After a while, he spoke in a low voice. "Your father understands. You may withdraw." I quietly returned to my room. The moment I pushed the door open, someone embraced me tightly from behind. "Why are you back so late?" I turned my head to look at Mu Jin'an and smiled. "General Mu, isn't the wall around the prime minister's estate built a bit too low?" Mu Jin'an chuckled softly. "Even if it were a zhang taller, it wouldn't be able to stop me." He lowered his head and planted several light kisses on my cheek before releasing me. His expression gradually turned serious. "Shen Jiao's matter has been exposed. Pei Heng will definitely take action. You must be careful." I couldn't help but laugh coldly. "Let him come." Mu Jin'an looked at me deeply, his voice softening considerably. "Xiaoxiao, what exactly did Pei Heng do to you in the end?" I froze for a second, momentarily unsure how to begin. After a long while, my eyes reddened as I spoke softly. "Mu Jin'an, if I told you that I once had a dream, in that dream, Pei Heng bullied me. He destroyed my entire family and caused me to die miserably in the harem. So I want revenge. Would you believe me?" Mu Jin'an's eyes darkened like an abyss. After a moment of silence, he gently stroked my cheek. "Xiaoxiao, I don't know if I was in your dream or not. But right now, with me here, I will never let him bully you again." Hearing this, my heart instantly softened. I hugged him gently, thinking to myself, "Mu Jin'an, you're here. You've always been here." After my father entered the palace, the emperor suddenly flew into a rage. He summoned Pei Heng into the palace and berated him for an entire night. It was said that the empress had to kneel outside the hall of mental cultivation for a full day before the emperor's anger subsided. Pei Heng was punished with a month of house arrest, while Shen Jiao was demoted to an official prostitute. That day, I stood on a distant bridge and watched as Shen Jiao was dragged away by the officials. She cried until her voice was hoarse, continuously calling Pei Heng's name, but no one came to save her from beginning to end. The fifth prince stood beside me and pretended to sigh. Such a beauty. It's truly a pity. I shot him a cold glance. A pity. Pei Zhan coughed lightly and quickly turned his face away. Not a pity. Not a pity at all. I withdrew my gaze. In my mind, the scene from my previous life resurfaced. The moment I caught Shen Jiao in Pei Heng's bed. Back then, she had also put on this pitiful appearance. It was precisely this fake vulnerability that had caused Pei Heng to sacrifice countless loyal ministers for her sake. The day Pei Heng ordered my execution, Shen Jiao did not allow me to commit suicide. She ordered people to beat me with staves, one strike after another, from my calves to my thighs, crushing my flesh and bones bit by bit. The pain made me faint. She then had them pour boiling water over me to force me awake. She wanted me to remain conscious and endure every bit of agony. She said she wanted to take revenge for the entire Shen family. The painful memories surged up, making my chest feel suffocated. I clenched my fists tightly, forcing myself not to tremble. A warm hand suddenly grasped mine gently. Mu Jin'an leaned close to my ear, his voice steady and deep. Xiaoxiao, don't be impatient. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. We still have plenty of time. Even though this man didn't know what Shen Jiao had done to me, he could still sense the pain and hatred in my heart. He didn't ask questions, but he always stood firmly behind me. Without Pei Heng's protection, Shen Jiao ultimately fell into the brothels. The fifth prince would occasionally visit her. He said her eyes had completely lost their spirit. She was like a walking corpse. As for Pei Heng, he shut himself inside his estate and made no moves. Mu Jin'an asked me, just Shen Jiao alone can't do anything to Pei Heng. What do you plan to do next? My voice turned icy. Do you know why Shen Pingzhang colluded with the enemy? For money. Mu Jin'an was slightly stunned. I continued, Pei Heng knew his own limited abilities, so he could only use money and benefits to win over officials. Shen Pingzhang desperately wanted Shen Jiao to become empress, so he traded court intelligence for money and the lives of thousands of people for a mountain of gold and silver to help Pei Heng solidify his position. In my previous life, after Shen Jiao entered the palace, I had once asked my father to reinvestigate Shen Pingzhang's case. Only then did I learn that Pei Heng had also been involved. Unfortunately, by that point, it was like riding a tiger. It was impossible to get off. But in this life, Pei Heng would not escape. Mu Jin'an looked at me. There was clear doubt in his eyes, as if he wanted to ask how I knew so much. But in the end, he only nodded. I understand. But investigating this matter wasn't easy and involved far too many connections. It would probably take time. I leaned lightly against him. Don't worry, I still have my father. Princess Changli's birthday banquet was held at the imperial villa outside the capital. She had invited many noble young ladies to attend. In my previous life, because I had married Pei Heng, my relationship with Changli had been quite harmonious. I knew she wasn't aligned with Pei Heng, so I arrived at the banquet right on time. During the feast, a maid accidentally spilled wine on my dress. A female official immediately led me into the inner hall to change. The moment I stepped inside, Yu Chuan was suddenly called away. Alarm instantly flared in my chest. Just as I turned to leave, the doors of the hall slammed shut and were locked tight from the outside. A low, dark voice rang out. Xiaoer, long time no see. I whipped around and saw Pei Heng seated on a chair, his gaze shadowed as he stared at me. What does Your Highness the Crown Prince want? I had vaguely guessed his intentions, yet I forced myself to remain calm. His eyes seemed to pierce through everything. Pei Heng laughed coldly, frost filling his gaze. Xiaoer, this isn't the capital. Your Mu Jin isn't here. My fifth brother is truly capable. Not only did he track down Shen Jiao, he even used the affection between you and Mu Jin'an to drag the Prime Minister's estate to his side. Truly surprising. His voice grew lower and heavier. I originally planned to spare you. But unfortunately, you all caused Jiao to be humiliated in the brothels and made me receive Father Emperor's punishment. so I cannot let you off. He stared at me, each word slicing like a cold blade. Lin Xiaoxiao, even though you and Mu Jin'an have received Father Emperor's marriage decree, I have ways to ensure you never consummate it. My heart turned to ice. I now understood his plan completely. Pei Heng, you're truly audacious. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will punish you for this? Pei Heng snorted coldly. This crown prince is here resting due to illness. You barged into my room of your own accord and tried to seduce me. What crime have I committed? Just as I opened my mouth to retort, I suddenly felt my limbs go soft and powerless. A chill raced down my spine. I glared at him in fury. Pei Heng, you put something in the incense. He was calmly playing with the incense burner on the table. The medicine is very strong. You'll enjoy it soon enough. He strode forward, scooped me up, and threw me onto the bed. My belt was ripped away with one savage tug. The smile on his lips was full of mockery. Tomorrow, everyone will see you walk out of my room with disheveled clothes. I wonder what your father will think. Mu Jin'an, will he still want you then? He leaned down close. Xiaoer, I originally intended for you to become crown princess. But since you wouldn't listen, and have now lost your chastity before marriage, I'll reluctantly take you as a concubine. Your father will probably thank me. My outer robe couldn't withstand his force and was torn off in an instant, leaving only my inner garments. Tears poured down my face like rain, but my body refused to move. Pei Heng lowered his head and kissed my neck. Xiaoer, this drug is very potent. You'll like it. My mind buzzed. I had known he wouldn't let it go easily. I had imagined him pressuring my father, targeting Mu Jin'an, even assassinating me. But I never expected him to use such a filthy method to force me into submission. This man was even more shameless than I had thought. The drug was too strong. My consciousness began to blur. In the chaos, I heard the doors being smashed open. Someone charged in. A figure lifted Pei Heng bodily and kicked him crashing to the ground. The sounds of fists and kicks, of miserable screams. I struggled to turn my head and saw Mu Jin'an strangling Pei Heng, his eyes blood red, killing intent surging to the heavens. No. I forced myself upright and threw myself in front of him. Jin'an, you can't kill him. Pei Heng's mouth was full of blood, yet he still provoked viciously. Kill me. Mu Jin, do you dare? The veins on Mu Jin's hand bulged violently. His voice was hoarse and terrifying. You'll find out soon enough. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, sobbing until I choked. Jin'an, don't, please don't. But he seemed to have gone mad and couldn't hear me at all. Pei Heng's breathing grew weaker and weaker. Despair flooded my heart. If he died here, Mu Jin'an would definitely have to die with him. At this point, I let go of him, quietly sat down beside him, and whispered like a breeze. Jin'an, whether life or death, I will stay with you. Mu Jin'an, in this life, if I cannot grow old with you, then I am willing to descend into the underworld with you. The hand strangling the throat suddenly loosened. Mu Jin'an gasped for several breaths, then took off his outer robe and wrapped it tightly around me before carrying me straight out to the carriage. How did you get here? I asked groggily. Princess Changli has ties with the fifth prince. She noticed Pei Heng acting strangely and sent word. The drug surged violently through my body. I twisted restlessly in his arms. Jen, I'm so hot. The arm holding me tightened abruptly, pinning me in place. I know, I'll take you to a doctor. I irritably pried his hand away and turned his face toward me. I don't need a doctor. I need you. Mu Jin'an's gaze immediately dodged away. His voice was low and restrained. His face still tried to stay calm, but he clearly didn't dare meet my eyes. I climbed straight onto his lap, wrapped my arms around his neck, and kissed him. Mu Jin'an's entire body stiffened, his breathing turned chaotic. He tried to avoid me, voice hoarse with restraint. Xiaoxiao, we aren't married yet. This isn't good for you. I laughed mockingly at him. Mu Jin'an, you dared to do something earth-shattering, yet now you want to talk about propriety. My cold, slender fingers wandered over his neck. Waves surged in Mu Jin's eyes. The carriage rocked nonstop, and the spring scenery inside never stopped. Mu Jin'an leading troops to storm the imperial villa enraged the emperor. Pei Heng was gravely injured and nearly lost his life. I recounted everything to my father and begged him to help Mu Jin'an. My father suppressed the fury in his chest and ordered me not to leave the estate. I waited anxiously. Finally, 3 days later, news arrived from the fifth prince. Pei Heng's improper conduct had earned him 3 months of house arrest in his estate with no visitors allowed. Mu Jin'an had mobilized troops without permission to attack the crown prince, and was punished by having his position temporarily suspended. He was sent to Lingnan to suppress the rebellion. I couldn't leave the estate, so I could only wait for Mu Jin'an to come find me. But he never appeared. He went straight to Lingnan. I brooded for 2 days before finally climbing the wall to the Prince of Lin's estate. Pei Zhan didn't seem surprised to see me. He simply shook his head and told me to sit. Your Highness, did Mu Jin'an really just leave like that? Oh, before he left he came to see me once. I stood there without speaking. Pei Zhan laughed mockingly. He's angry. Relax, he came to ask me to look after you and make sure nothing happens to you. I pouted. Then why didn't he say it to me directly? Pei Zhan gave an awkward smile. You should go home and ask your father about that. Pei Zhan said it was my father himself who had knelt before the emperor and begged for Mu Jin'an to be sent to Lingnan. On the surface it looks like exile, but in truth it's protection. Your father also personally stormed the general's estate and beat Mu Jin'an black and blue. I heard the prime minister was terrifyingly fierce. He beat the border general until his face was swollen and bruised. With no strength left to fight back, I was so shocked I couldn't speak. I couldn't imagine Mu Jin'an being beaten by my father. Why did father hit him? Pei Zhan looked at me meaningfully. Getting beaten isn't necessarily a bad thing. Mu Jin'an didn't suffer that beating for nothing. After all, it was a gift from his father-in-law. He's probably secretly delighted. I didn't understand. Pei Zhan said nothing more and simply told me to go home and stop causing trouble. I refused to leave. I sat down and asked him, why did the emperor only punish Pei Heng with house arrest? Pei Zhan looked at me deeply. Because he is the crown prince, the future emperor. How could he be allowed to have any stains on his record? Establishing a crown prince is a matter of state that affects the entire court. Unless the crown prince commits an unforgivable mistake, it's not easy to depose him. I blinked. Then tell me, is murdering one's own brother an unforgivable mistake? Pei Zhan nearly spat out his tea. Lin Xiaoxiao, are you waiting for me to die? Do you want to go insane? My life isn't a life. Hurry and see the guest out. See the guest out. When Mu Jin'an returned, it was already the middle of winter. The rebellion in Lingnan had been suppressed cleanly and efficiently. The emperor restored his military authority, and his attitude had clearly changed. Pei Heng remained extremely cautious and didn't dare make any improper moves. Even when he learned Shen Jiao was 2 months pregnant, he didn't act rashly. It seemed the 3 months of reflection had truly worked. The emperor appeared somewhat satisfied. He began letting Pei Heng attend court discussions, and even frequently kept him in the hall of mental cultivation to talk through the night. To everyone else, this was a sign that the emperor had restored his trust. Pei Heng's position as future emperor seemed as solid as a rock. But only I knew the emperor didn't have much time left. In my previous life, 2 months after I married Pei Heng, the emperor passed away. Only then did everyone learn he had been gravely ill for many years. By the current timeline, the critical moment was approaching. That was why he could only desperately prop up Pei Heng's position to stabilize the court. In other words, we no longer had time. Everything had to be accelerated. Pei Heng quickly learned of the emperor's critical condition. No one could restrain him anymore. Finally, he secretly went to see Shen Jiao. Just as I had predicted, Shen Jiao told him she had been forced by Pei Zhan, but the child in her belly was his flesh and blood. That very night, during a storm, 5th Prince Pei Zhan was assassinated inside his estate. The entire court was shaken. With his only rival dead, Pei Heng became even more lawless. He knew very well that even if the prime minister's estate and the general's estate refused to side with him, as long as Pei Zhan was dead, the officials would sooner or later bow and flatter him to protect themselves. The emperor was devastated by the 5th prince's death and took to his bed. Rumors began spreading through the court that the emperor probably wouldn't survive the year. On the day of the Little New Year, Pei Heng attended the palace banquet on the emperor's behalf. He sat in the highest seat, listening to the ministers praise him one after another, his face arrogant and cold. It was as if he were already the emperor. His gaze suddenly swept over me, and a contemptuous smile appeared. Shower, come here. Under the eyes of the entire hall, I slowly stood up and walked step by step toward him. Pour wine for me. Pei Heng leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly on the table. Every gesture dripped with mockery. I picked up the wine jug and filled his cup. He tilted his head back and drained it, then burst into loud laughter. Suddenly he gripped my wrist tightly. Xiaoer, if only you had listened earlier. How wonderful that would have been. He leaned in close. If you hadn't stubbornly insisted on marrying Mu Jin'an back then, perhaps today you would already be my future empress. He narrowed his eyes. Well, do you regret it? I smiled. Regret. Pei Heng immediately looked pleased. The smugness in his eyes grew increasingly insane. When I ascend the throne, the first person I deal with will be Mu Jin'an. He will only suffer. He yanked my wrist. Stay here tonight and serve me well. Afterward, I can bestow you the title of noble consort. How about that? I burst into laughter, the sound growing louder and louder. Pei Heng's face instantly turned sinister. What are you laughing at? I looked straight at him, my voice cold as ice. Pei Heng, I'm laughing because you're about to die and you still don't know it. I tilted my head slightly. You've already drunk the wine that will send you on your way. Pei Heng's expression changed drastically. He shot to his feet and reached out to grab my collar. At that exact moment, a figure charged forward. Mu Jin'an kicked him flying, then turned and shielded me behind him. You have guts. Are you trying to rebel? Pei Heng crawled up from the ground and pointed at us, roaring. Guards, arrest them. The imperial guards swarmed in with drawn blades. The ministers in the hall panicked, completely confused about what was happening. Everyone instinctively looked toward my father, but he simply poured himself a cup of wine and drank calmly, as if he saw nothing at all. Arrest the traitors. Pei Heng bellowed. Mu Jin and I were instantly surrounded in the center of the hall. Mu Jin'an swept his gaze around. Not a single guard dared to advance. The illustrious border general was not someone ordinary guards could touch. Seeing this, Pei Heng completely lost his mind. He snatched a long sword and stabbed madly toward me. In a flash, Mu Jin'an's blade blocked right in front of his throat. Mu Jin'an, you are rebelling. Pei Heng gnashed his teeth. Mu Jin'an laughed coldly and gave a light wave of his hand. Boom! Hundreds of soldiers burst into the grand hall under cover of night. Fifth Prince Pei Heng slowly walked in. Pei Heng, you're not dead. How is that possible? Pei Heng smiled faintly. Elder brother, clearly what? Clearly you sent people to kill me, yet I'm still alive, right? The ministers exchanged glances. Whispers erupted throughout the hall. Pei Heng's face turned as cold as ice. Father Emperor is gravely ill. This crown prince is the son of heaven. He pointed straight at Pei Heng. You faked your death to deceive the emperor, and even dare to frame this crown prince. You should be imprisoned in the Dali temple to await punishment. Pei Heng looked at him as if he were already dead. His voice was bone, chillingly cold. You, a traitor who colluded with the enemy and harmed his own brother. Dare to call yourself the son of heaven. Pei Heng stood frozen. Only now did he fully realize that everyone standing before him today had prepared long ago, and he had already fallen into their trap. Piles of evidence were carried out and placed before the hall. The ministers examined them one by one. Every face changed dramatically. Inside were complete proof that he had sheltered the daughter of a convicted traitor, plotted against his brother, and was even involved in Shen Pingzhang's collusion with the enemy. Pei Heng's face twisted. He suddenly laughed maniacally. All fake. Everything is fake. Pei Heng forged it all to frame me. Until one figure stepped into the grand hall. His pupils suddenly shrank. Zhejiao, you. Shen Jio walked arm in arm with Pei Heng, still wearing that familiar fragile and pitiful appearance. She spoke softly. Heng Ji, turn back while you still can. Just confess your crimes. Pei Heng's chest heaved violently. A mouthful of blood nearly sprayed out. Ha ha ha. He threw his head back and laughed wildly, eyes bloodshot. Zhejiao, you betrayed me. After all these years of love, you betrayed me. His gaze turned ferocious. You think Pei Heng can protect you? Stupid bitch. Shenjio still wore that familiar pitiful look. I reported the crown prince's crimes. Zhang Ji has agreed to let me perform a meritorious deed. She gently stroked her belly, her face full of tenderness. Besides, I am carrying Zhang Ji's child. This is his eldest son. The future crown prince. You're dreaming. Pei Heng roared. You're all dreaming. He stepped up onto the high platform, eyes sweeping across the court. Father Emperor is still alive. I am the crown prince he personally appointed. His voice grew more and more deranged. Pei Heng has no rightful claim and no justification. Leading troops to force the palace today is rebellion. He will be reviled for generations. He pointed down at the hall. You are all subjects of Great Zhou. You must stand with the emperor and with this crown prince. Anyone who supports Pei Heng is a rebel and traitor, punishable by the extermination of your 9 familial clans. The hall fell deathly silent. No one spoke, because he was right. He was still the crown prince. No matter how many crimes he had committed, without the emperor's decree, he remained legitimate. At that moment, a steady voice rang out. Rebellious son Pei Heng, receive the decree. My father slowly stood up. In his hand was the emperor's imperial edict. Pei Heng's face turned deathly pale in an instant. My father unrolled the edict. His voice echoed clearly through the grand hall. Crown Prince Pei Heng has deceived and confused the sovereign. His crimes are unpardonable. He is hereby immediately deposed as crown prince and demoted to commoner. He paused, then continued reading. The 5th son, Pei Heng, possesses both virtue and ability, wisdom and courage. He is hereby established as crown prince. The moment the words fell, the entire hall was silent as death. A moment later, Mu Jin'an knelt on one knee. This subject pays respects to the crown prince. Boom. All the soldiers behind him knelt in unison. Long live the crown prince. The ministers looked at one another, then knelt one after another following my father. No one dared object. From that night on, Pei Heng was officially established as crown prince. My father walked up to Pei Heng. He looked at him with complicated eyes for a long time before speaking slowly. His Majesty left a message for you. A faint spark of hope lit up in Pei Heng's eyes. He stared fixedly at my father, eyes red. My father's voice was cold as ice. You are ignorant and foolish, unworthy of being my son. One sentence completely shattered the last of his illusions. Pei Heng collapsed as if all the bones had been pulled from his body. Finally, he burst into tears like rain and crumpled to the ground. I pushed through the chaotic crowd and walked step by step toward him. Pei Heng. I looked down at him, my voice freezing to the bone. How does it feel to be betrayed? Does it hurt? Is it disgusting? All the hatred I had suppressed for 2 lifetimes surged wildly in my eyes. Pei Heng jerked his head up, eyes dazed. Lin Xiaoxiao, you hate me. Why? I didn't answer. I simply took a dagger from my sleeve and tossed it with a clang in front of him. Tears fell, but the corners of my lips curved up. You will never know. Behind me, Mu Jin'an gently wrapped his arms around me. Without a word, he quietly led me out of the chaotic grand hall. Pei Heng committed suicide on the spot. After death, he was not allowed into the imperial ancestral records. On the 1st day of the 1st month, the emperor passed away. Pei Heng ascended the throne and proclaimed himself emperor. Shen Jiao waited and waited for the new emperor to welcome her back to the palace. But the person she waited for never came. The one who walked in was me. She looked at me in terror. Lin Xiaoxiao, why is it you? Where is Zhang Ji? I looked at her, my voice indifferent. Your Zhang Ji will not be coming anymore. Impossible. Shen Jiao shook her head frantically. I'm carrying his child. I cut her off mercilessly. You're only carrying a bastard. I stared straight into her eyes. Pei Heng has never touched you. Everything was just a trap to topple Pei Heng. Shen Jiao's face turned deathly pale in an instant. I curved my lips slightly. Did the daughter of a convicted traitor really think she could become empress? Her entire expression changed. The fragile, pitiful look vanished, replaced by demonic ferocity. Lin Xiaoxiao, it was you. This was all your scheme. I nodded with a calm smile. You really are a bit smarter than Pei Heng. Bitch. Shen Jiao charged at me madly, but the guards immediately restrained her. She screamed and struggled like a dog that had lost its master. I looked at her. For a moment, I hesitated. In my previous life, her crimes were unforgivable. But in this life, she hadn't yet had the chance to act against me. At that moment, a calm male voice sounded from behind me. Guards, drag her down. Beat her with 100 military rods every day. Only after 10 full days may she be executed. I froze and turned around. Mu Jin'an stood behind me, his gaze deep and steady. How did he know? His eyes lingered on me for a long time before he spoke softly. Lin Xiaoxiao, I've come to your side. My tears finally fell. In that instant, It felt as if every deepest wound in my heart had been healed. I looked at him and smiled through my tears. Mu Jin'an, long time no see. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.